All right, I'd like to call to order the 5:30 workshop, 6822. Roll call, Carrie, please.
Mayor Preden?
I am here.
Council President Conley?
Present.
Councilor Blum? Councilor Letts?
Present.
Councilor Ross?
Present. Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Welcome. It's rodeo week. Get excited. You're up, Damon. We got an economic update and you're ready to go, I'm sure.
I am ready to go.
About how long is your presentation, do you think? Just
Better question is, how long do you have for me to speak?
about 40 minutes.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm prepped to go, a good 3 hours if you guys.
I know you could.
Yeah.
Let's push around 40. Leave us time for questions if you don't mind at the end.
Yes, totally. Well, actually, and even ask while we're going through. Because I
Okay.
think some of the, we'll move through a couple different topics here, which is this close enough for you all to hear back there? I'm not really projecting backwards, so.
That's better, thank you.
Yeah, okay. So we'll cover some topics. So as we move through, please interrupt me as we go through and we can spend some time on them. I think the beginning here, we'll talk about the employment numbers, and that will be sort of, for you all and sisters, the most sort of localized stuff. So let's hit that heavy in the beginning here.
There we go.
Crazy times, obviously. I mean, this is the first time I've seen you guys in person in 2 years, but I don't know, a few Zoom updates in the last 2 years as well. And so you're familiar with sort of the trajectory that we saw with the COVID impacts, obviously. Here I have our employment numbers for the City of Sisters, payroll employment. So this doesn't include people who are self-employed. It doesn't include agricultural workers, which, by the way, we don't have agricultural worker jobs inside the City of Sisters. That doesn't exist. Well, I can think about it. Maybe there's, how big is the city limits? How far does it go? There might be some agricultural workers somewhere that would be in there, but we're not counting them here. So these are your traditional payroll jobs. These are workers who get W-2s. Think of it that way, okay? The shock or the impact that we saw due to COVID here locally was, it happened, there were jobs lost. However, it was relatively muted compared to the county as a whole, which was very surprising to me. I think the thing that we all know now, there's no surprises, that leisure hospitality was the hardest hit industry because of the lockdown. Restaurants, hotels, tourism facilities, amenities were the areas where we saw the biggest job losses. And when people think of Sisters, they think of all those things. They think of restaurants, they think of hotels, they think of tourism facilities. And yet it was an area that we didn't see relative to places like Bend, was significantly harder hit. Bend saw 1 in 5 jobs lost. It was about half that ratio of job losses here locally. And it wasn't so much that we didn't see those industries affected at the same level. It was that we had other industries simultaneously adding jobs while those ones were declining. So manufacturing was growing, professional business services was growing. The only other community in Central Oregon I could think of that had sort of a simultaneous, yes, we're having these impacted industries, but other things are growing, was Prineville, where they had the data centers just continue to rip roar through the pandemic. And so despite the restaurant closures and all that stuff, I don't know if I have, well, you have a slide, I think, that I'll show in a minute here, but you'll see Kirk County is just off the charts as far as job growth. Insane growth there. And Sisters in a lot of ways really mimic that as well, where it was yeah, we got affected, but the growth of the momentum that we saw in other industries really helped to mute that impact. So that dip there, you can see that little V is the COVID impact. These are not smooth data. This is not seasonally adjusted. I purposely have been trying to do less of that. One, because that means you have to all listen to me instead of looking at the graph and figure out what it means. But number two, also, we have such a seasonal economy. I just like people to see that seasonality is normal. Ups and downs are normal. The long-term trajectory is also something to pay attention to, but reminding ourselves that we're sort of landing back in normal seasonality again, which is a breath of fresh air of normality that we haven't seen for a while. So obviously we got these ups and these downs. You can see the COVID V that's in there. I highlighted December of 2019. I did that for one very important reason, which is the most recent payroll data we have for the City of Sisters is from December of 2021. So we have through the fourth quarter, through the end of the year, is the most recent data at the city level. And so that's, looking back, that's our most recent pre-COVID of the same month that we can look at. And you can see we had roughly 2,400 jobs in Sisters, payroll jobs in December of 2019. We were almost recovered by December of 2020. almost. I mean, that these aren't estimates. This is real, real payroll records. So I can't say like a margin of error. It was there. I mean, so we weren't recovered, but we were very, very close to being recovered, which is way ahead of the curve for anyone else, except for Prineville once again, as far as the recovery goes. But we get to December 2021, so now this sounds like ancient history because that was 6 months ago and the world changes so quick. But believe me, payroll records that are only 6 months old is hot off the presses. We're fully recovered here locally, and not just fully recovered. I highlighted here 382 jobs more than we had before the beginning of the pandemic, 16% growth. Once again, the only place that compares to this level of growth we've seen is Crook County. Prineville specifically, and you guys don't have massive data centers being built. So like,
Thank God.
Well, you say that, but there was sort of a side tangent here on that. Like, there was a moment when I started the job before they were built, when they were debating coming in, and there was sort of the questions, is the juice worth the squeeze with something like this? It's a huge impact environmentally. There's a lot of tax incentives that the city was giving to them and the county was giving to these data centers. And it was like, are we going to get enough back to justify it? And I even sort of like, I don't really know the answer to this. It could go either way. I think in hindsight, it's one of those ones where I think the juice was probably worth the squeeze when you see just the sheer impact and transformation to that economy that was really dying. It was in fact one of those economies where I thought there was no chance they'd recover from the last recession. Like I was saying that 3 years ago. I'm still, no, they'll never recover from the last recession. And boom, just skyrocketed past it. So it's one of those things where I'm like, were they the right incentives to give? Who knows? But in the end, I think that it feels less controversial now than it did, 10 years ago. For sure.
And my comments related to the fact we're not sending underneath BPA high tension power lines, which are necessary for the data centers to even locate in the beginning. So I love the way our town looks as opposed to.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. They're fortunate that the topography means that they're kind of hidden from town too, But Prineville's a very unique place in that hole. But yes, you guys are not in a hole here, and they would stand out like a sore thumb, that's for sure. And I'm glad, yes, that you did, Adam. But it is interesting to see that, without having these huge construction jobs inflows, you're still sort of elephant in the room here. So let's go to the next slide real quick.
I have a clarification question on this. Is this jobs within the city, or is this employed people who live in the city?
Great question. Yes. So this is jobs employed in local businesses. So this says nothing to where the workers live. It says everything to where the worker works, which is here. It's interesting to look at the inverse as well. And we'll see that I didn't bring the labor force numbers, but those have grown as well. But we've also seen an increasing amount of commuting both ways, right? Both, from Redmond and from Bend and from Sisters out to both those places as well. So there's huge margins of error for those sort of commuting patterns. But from what we're seeing, it's kind of a net, like the growth has increased in the volumes back and forth, but the net change isn't much. So we're not like seeing an increasing number of Sisters commuters leaving because they don't find opportunity or whatever it might be, which is encouraging to see. So just growth, but no net change. So, obviously the question is then like, well, what has changed? And we could dig into the broad industries. It gets confidential really quick in a place like Sisters. And so I can highlight sort of the big industries that have shifted. And once again, the 2 points that we're comparing in time here are the December before the pandemic, so December 2019, to what the employment numbers were in these industries December of 2021. And once again, reminding you that we've added a net 380 or whatever the number of jobs was in the last slide. The elephant in the room is on the top two here. So significant amount of job growth, net growth in that period of time in professional and business services, as well as manufacturing. This is where, I think I said this last time I talked to you all on Zoom, this is one of the things where if you showed this to anybody else in the state of Oregon, I think they'd be like, what? Sisters does this stuff? Just a testament to some of the professionalization of Sisters. I don't know what else to call it. Transitioning out of maybe a tourism-based economy. And, in a lot of ways, it's like Bend small. Bend had the same transformation, which was resource-based, built-in sort of construction, some tourism to attract people, quality of life was highlighted, and then all of a sudden, all these professional jobs showed up, people bringing businesses, industry with them to maximize the quality of life. And the story for Bend is the exact same one for Sisters, just smaller, and people don't really talk about it. They still think of it as the place where you go get a coffee and go to the boutiques and all the things. So really cool to see this, and something that I'm like, I'm tempted to just write something about it and then feed it to the local media so that they're like, well, something's happening in Sisters, but pretty cool. So, question.
Quick question, yeah. Can you kind of break out a little and just remind us what professional and business services are, just so we have a kind of a round knowledge?
It is
because that's kind of a broad.
It's very broad, and there's stuff in there that so some of it is, like waste management is in there, to give an example of like one extreme. But that's not what's growing. You also have things like janitorial services. So I don't want to say like this is like a white collar industry, because it includes a lot of blue collar jobs as well. But on the other end, you have professional and technical services. So this is everything from like engineering firms, architectural firms, marketing agencies, all these sorts of office-y businesses. It also includes, which you don't have a lot of here, management of companies and enterprises. Headquarters of companies would be included under here. So it is a bit of a catch-all, but it is the best one that captures sort of broad industry, sort of more white-collar industry growth, even though it does include some of the other stuff.
And to follow up, is there any idea of is there traded sector? There's mixed traded sector business in there, right?
So the vast majority of it's trade sector.
Okay.
Yeah, you would, except for the things like the business services, those janitorial ones, the landscaping, et cetera, you would consider almost all of it traded sector in here. Yeah, or obviously waste management too. Like I can think of some places in Arlington that might be true, that it's traded sector there, but
I got you.
but we're not receiving other people's trash, so yeah. But yeah, the manufacturing one is another one that's big, and I'm preaching to the choir here. You guys know about the manufacturing growth, and places like Laird and whatnot that would be coded under manufacturing there. Down at the all the ones in the middle, we could just say pretty modest changes, nothing big happening there. We're talking small numbers. The declines though. One in the middle, leisure and hospitality. So once again, that was our hardest hit industry. That's recovered. It's back to above what it was. Not significantly above what it was, but it is back to above where it was. And then the only two that are down right now, educational services, which is a pretty modest decline. If I'm honest, only 10 jobs down. That's both private and public are included under here. And that's a pretty common trend we've seen across the state, where most communities haven't seen a full bounce back in ed. Mostly now, not because of busing or any of the COVID impacts. It was enrollments down pretty significantly.
Does that include online learning?
That's just jobs. So if you're a teacher who works in the school district here, then it would include you. Yeah, even if you're only doing online classes. Yeah.
And so these numbers do include government jobs?
They do.
Okay.
Yeah. They're lumped in this instance, which I often would break them out, but for where the changes are happening, sometimes it's easier to lump them together, especially on the education side. And then, yeah, retail trades down too, which is another one that's been a bit of a head scratcher. Personally, I can't quite figure that one out. I do think that some of the sort of ma and pa, Main Street type businesses that are, the boutique-y stuff, Bend has struggled with this through the pandemic, where it was like big boxes did okay, places that had sort of delivery, the Amazons of the world did really great. So like across the nation, retail is doing well. In a lot of our communities in Central Oregon, we see some modest decline still. And I think that's sort of that smaller scale ma and pa type retail is still taking a bit to bounce back. But I'm pretty confident. I mean, once again, only 24 jobs is pretty small. And I think it will come back pretty soon here. So transitioning a little bit higher level, because the data just gets infinitely better when we start talking about counties instead of cities. Here's when I was talking about how Kerr County is like the elephant in the room for Central Oregon. Employment is 11% above what it was before the pandemic began in Kerr County. And like I said, 2 months ago, they fully recovered from the Great Recession, the 2008 Great Recession. Something that, once again, I said predicted would never happen. And so I'm eating crow on that one a little bit right now. But Deschutes, we have fully recovered as a county. So we're 1% above where we were before the pandemic. We're the first metropolitan area to recover in Oregon fully. And also, by the way, we were the one hit the hardest during the pandemic. So very Deschutes of us. It's sort of our pattern. We're really, the resiliency, economic resiliency is based on two other R's, which is just clever and great that we have this. The first part of resiliency is resistance, like how will you fight off a recession? We traditionally are really bad at resisting recessions. The last 3 or 4, we've been disproportionately impacted. Don't call it a trend yet. The 5th one, it won't. But anyways, traditionally we're bad at resisting, we're fighting off recessions. The other side of resiliency is another R, recoverability, how quickly you bounce back from recessions. And we are phenomenal at that. And once again, we followed suit like always and bounced back really quickly. So I don't know if that's good or not, but we are the hardest hit and the fastest to recover. Jefferson County is just right behind us. They haven't quite gotten there, but if you include all 3 Central Oregon counties together, as a region, we fully recovered, and the state's still sitting almost 2% down, which is about on par with the average state. So once again, Oregon was a little bit disproportionately impacted by the pandemic, and we've recovered a wee bit quicker to be back to sort of on par with the average state. So pretty confident here by the end of summer that the state will probably be mostly recovered, somewhere in there. So when we see the jobs recovery, so, you know, the first question I was getting for a lot of months there was like, where the heck are all the workers? Like, what's going on? You know, we're still, you know, all these businesses are trying to recover from this pandemic and they can't get the workers back. And I think we sort of missed the mark a little bit. So the context a second ago was we're fully recovered. Here in Sisters, we're like, you know, well above 16% above where we were before in employment in local businesses. So these businesses not only recovered, they've expanded above what their levels were on average. You know, there are the examples of some businesses that have declined or closed, but new openings and expansions in other businesses have more than made up for any of those declines that are out there today. So we are at all-time high employment levels in local businesses. That led to a lot of workers, that opportunity and the rebounding, the recovery, and then the expansion pulled a lot of workers that were unemployed back into the employed category. So we're looking here at total Central Oregon unemployed workers. It's the complete inverse of the last graph. The last one was employment. So as you would expect, unemployment looks the opposite of that. And if it doesn't, then you should be skeptical. It does, so we're good. You know, we went from 4,400 or so unemployed workers before the pandemic. So it wasn't like we had 0 unemployed people before the pandemic. This is sort of a normal thing that happens. You always have a certain amount of structural unemployment or seasonal unemployment that exists at any given point. That was, by the way, right before the pandemic, the lowest unemployment rates we'd ever had on record in Central Oregon. Here in Deschutes County, we were at 3.3% right before the pandemic. So that might look like a large chunk of human beings, 4,400, but it represented as a share of our workforce, by far the smallest number of unemployed we'd ever seen. It skyrocketed, and then it came down pretty aggressively. Once again, the inverse of that V-shaped recovery that we saw. And you could see it had, besides that sort of winter wave that we saw, not this winter, but the winter before, where it sort of ticked up a skosh, we are in a pretty strong, just constant trajectory. I want to make no statements about federal policy here with this one, but there was a lot of folks for a while that were kind of like, man, you know, if it wasn't for all the generous unemployment insurance benefits, these workers would be back and we'd have them. And that's the reason why we can't find workers. I highlighted where the federal expansion of UI benefits expired. And I don't know about you, you know, it's hard to identify much of a trend in that, you know, if that was the thing holding workers back from going back to work, the second it expired, we would have seen the number of unemployed shrink dramatically. And there was no noticeable trend. In fact, the trend flattened out a little bit actually after that happened. So the good news was workers wanted to work and they went back to work. That's the highlight there. And, you know, we can make some arguments whether or not those benefits were a few months longer than they should have been or not. I mean, I would have said maybe instead of end them at the end of summer of 2021, end them maybe at the beginning of summer, June or July, but you know, you're sort of splitting hairs there on that one. the good news is, like I said, the workers came back to work. So where we're sitting today, and I say today, we're talking about April, so it's actually mid-June, so it feels dated. I'm going to release in a week the May numbers. But where we were sitting 2.5 months ago was just under 4,800 unemployed workers. So our labor force has actually grown during that period of time. So we're, once again, splitting hairs here saying, like, are there any more unemployed today than there was before the pandemic? Statistically, I can't say there are. The unemployment rate in April was 3.6%. The margin for error for the unemployment rate is 0.3% each month. So once again, the record low is 3.3. So conveniently, I can't statistically say there is any difference in the level of unemployment we're seeing today versus the all-time low before the pandemic. Question?
You said sorry, I'm a little stuffed up. The May numbers are coming out
in a month, yeah, or sorry, in a week and a half.
Are they trending down? Or
oh, they're,
are
yeah,
they
they're still,
steady?
yeah. Although statewide, so the statewide numbers, we haven't released those yet. I can't say that.
So you don't have to, just a yes or no, are they trending down? That's all I need to know.
Yeah, they were trending down. The national number came out already. It was flat. The job growth was strong nationally in May. The change in the unemployment rate was unchanged, but once again, nationally, we're at almost record lows.
Don't think you can. I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah. I think we'll likely see I can't see us going below the previous low. I mean, 3.3% is like insane for us, especially with the seasonality we have in our economy. The fact that we got that low with seasonality, you just never see in highly seasonal economies like ours. So fairly unprecedented. We're at 3.6%. We might go down a few more tenths, but there's just no wiggle room to get much lower than that, especially because, the next slide, we might actually be overstating to some extent the number of unemployed workers that are out there today. You might have been hearing about this term, sort of the Great Resignation. You heard that? Okay, so that was popular. I mean, you're hearing it less now because people like to talk about inflation instead, how quickly we move to the next thing. But the Great Resignation concept was there's all these quits happening, and you could see this is the quit rate across the US. And on the far right here is the last 6-7 months, and you could see, whoa, that quit rate is well above what was normal. We are seeing 3% of the workforce quit on any given month. Any given month, that's a big number. And the perception when you hear Great Resignation was, oh, these people are quitting and they're living in mom and dad's basement playing video games or whatever the perception might have been. Not really acknowledging the fact that the baby boomer generation is hitting peak retirement right now, and a baby boomer retiring is a quit. Now they're not quitting, they're retiring, but it shows up statistically as the same thing. Yep. Now that's one big one, but also we saw, we'll get to it in a second here, but the demand for labor was so high that workers were finding all sorts of great opportunities. They were able to get higher pay, better working conditions, more work flexibility, whatever it might have been. And so you were seeing a lot of workers quit and then move on to other jobs, which instead of calling the Great Resignation is really what I like to call the Great Reshuffle. And societally, we would think of this as a positive thing. Like almost all of us in our career would have opportunities where we're like, yeah, I'm ready to move up into the next job or whatever it might be. I would love some higher pay to support my family, or, another occupation that sort of leads me on a new career trajectory, whatever that might be. So these are all good things. The problem is that there's a lot of good things happening simultaneously to the point where you're like, it's kind of overwhelmed businesses because churn is expensive, it's costly. And so too much churn happening simultaneously is really hard for the workforce or the labor force to sort of find equilibrium in that. And so it felt bonkers. And you might even say here, you're like, okay, what was normal before? The quit rate was around 2% before the pandemic. So roughly 2% of the workforce was quitting in any given month. That 1% difference, you're like, that shouldn't make that much of a difference. But it makes us realize in a lot of ways with this pandemic, how tenuous our equilibrium was with a lot of things in the economy. And I think labor is one of those. And we're seeing, when we're seeing these baby boomers retiring, we're seeing workers move on to other opportunities and all that happening simultaneously. It's really difficult for businesses to address. And once again, the whole point of even showing this was to emphasize that when someone quits, they statistically show up as unemployed usually for a month-ish, sometimes 2 months. And so when we're talking about what, we had 400 more unemployed people now, or 300 more than we had before the all-time low before the pandemic. In reality, we're seeing this great reshuffle here locally as well. So a bunch of these people are showing up as being unemployed. In reality, you're like, well, they're not unemployed because they quit and they're moving to the other job. They've already got the other job lined up. So it's not actually a worker a business could hire. So the supply is worse. The supply of labor is even worse today than the formal stats will show us because of this quit rate that we're seeing.
Are you going to use this slide anywhere else
Today? No.
in the future?
Yeah.
You have an autocorrect error.
Oh, I love that. Show me where. Quite.
Right there, yeah.
High quite rate. No, that was intentional.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's embarrassing is I showed this graph. Well, no, I guess I update it every time the data updates. So no,
But it looks like an autocorrect.
Yeah. Well,
It finished the word for you before you.
I think Microsoft knows better than we do, don't you think?
Well, certainly Bill Gates has always thought they do.
Always right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's get to the next one so we don't see my typo there.
I did have a unemployment question.
Yeah, please.
I gotta go back.
So that, let's go back in time. So I'm assuming that doesn't reflect, any workers or potential workers, especially parents or parents of young children that maybe were home, but then the pandemic hit and they were stuck, trapped at home. And, this is anecdotal, but I mean, I'm kind of in that category, and I know a lot of other people too, where they can't, and now we have kind of, we're in a childcare desert. But we're not people who ever applied for unemployment.
Yeah.
Because we were kind of out of the workforce, and then we're like, okay, now we're ready to go back in, and now, well, we can't go back in because there's no daycare, or no reliability, or school could close tomorrow, or that kind of thing. So is there any data reflecting that pool of employees? Because I imagine it's quite larger than it's ever been.
Yeah. It's interesting. So a few clarifying things. One, when we're talking about unemployed, statistically, it doesn't count whether or not you're on unemployment insurance.
Okay.
For that. Now, if you are on unemployment insurance, you sure as hell better show up statistically as unemployed, because to be receiving unemployment insurance benefits, you have to be actively seeking work and not working. So that's the definition statistically. So they are part of that big number, but unemployed statistically is bigger than just the benefits, the people on getting insurance. So like a young person who didn't have any, couldn't qualify or something would count as well towards the statistical number. To get to your point though about the folks who, have barriers to employment, whether that's childcare, increasingly transportation became one as well. Now with high gas prices, who knows, that might become a barrier too. We saw, so they're not classified as unemployed. We call them marginally attached workers. I don't have that data at the local level. We do have it at the statewide level. And that sort of marginal attached workforce. So they're ones that wouldn't say that they're unemployed because they're not actively seeking work. Because until that barrier is addressed, they're not actually going to look for a job, most of those folks. But they're still important because they're like, people who we hope, if we could address that barrier, would be part of the pool of labor, right? And it did spike aggressively during the pandemic. And we could almost assume, the vast majority of those were either people who had pre-existing sort of health conditions that felt uncomfortable working in a public setting during the pandemic, or the kids home from school thing and childcare, preschool closures, all that stuff as well. So those are probably the two big chunks of workers. We have seen that that's been almost depleted as of by the time we got through the end of this last year and most of 2022. That number's looking more normal-ish. It's still a little bit high, but
That's a state number.
A statewide number,
Okay.
yeah. The local one, once again, don't have any idea. We can assume that there's some commonality in the trend between us and the state. But it was encouraging to see that those folks who were sitting on the sidelines because there was some barrier have jumped back, which makes sense because schools are open and preschools are open and daycares are mostly open, and now you're dealing with like awkward closures for like a week and a half because there's a quarantine closure or something, as opposed to we'll see you when we see you. So it is moving in the right direction though, which is good.
Okay.
No typos here. No quites or high quites. You got it right. So this is another one where I typically smooth data, but I've stopped doing it because I think it's important to once again emphasize seasonality. This is the demand for labor. Demand for labor is measured by help wanted ads. So the number of job ads that are out there, local businesses hiring. We have a great data set that we pay for. It's not actually public data. We unfortunately have to pay money for it, but it is good data. And and it can track back for many, many years. And we use this to sort of understand, like, for us, in a lot of ways, it's a leading indicator. A job ad today turns into a job we count on payroll records a month, 2 months, 3 months down the road. So we're always trying to pay attention to what's going on in the trend there. I highlighted, once again, because of the seasonality, you always want to compare the same, any month to the same month in a previous year, okay? You wouldn't want to like say, well, what does the April number look like this year compared to January of last year? Like there's just some ridiculous consistent up and downs where we know our busy season in Central Oregon is in the summer. So we see a lot of job ads that come in the spring to hire, to surge hire for the summer season. And then it tends to dip and lower during the winter months as we see that summer season end, and then it picks back up every spring. So that's our pattern that we see. I highlighted every April going back to 2015 to give you a perspective of like what is normal April hiring numbers that we would expect in the spring season. So sort of in the middle there is the 2019 one, April 2019, 2,200 job ads was what we were seeing before the pandemic. A little bit lower than the years before that, which little known fact, I mean, no one really talked about it much, but we really saw a lot of the energy in the economy was waning before the pandemic. I don't want to say that we were necessarily going to move into a recession, but it was clearly stagnating pretty aggressively right before the pandemic started, which weirdly we got an injection that we're putting above where we might have been otherwise, which is a crazy thing that could have happened. So that's for another time. But you could see sort of levels before that stagnation in 2019. We were sitting in 28, 3,400, whatever it might be. We jumped in last big summer hiring season. We jumped well above what was normal, broke records in 2021 for hiring demand, businesses trying to hire. This number here is for all 3 counties combined. So the most recent April you see is a little bit higher even than last year at this time. The Deschutes County number is actually a wee bit lower. We're down 3% from last April. I don't want to say that's a trend yet. I do think that some of the things that are happening macro in the economy right now are starting to affect hiring demand, which is the goal of the Federal Reserve in killing demand of a superheated economy, and to address inflation is to lower demand, which eventually translates into less demand for workers. And I'll be completely honest, when you look at the supply, let's go to the next one. When we look at the relationship between the supply of workers we have, you have to slide that thing up so they can see that right here. When we look at the relationship between the supply of workers that we have, which once again is for all intents and purposes back to record low, and we compare that to this crazy demand that we have for workers, it's just not sustainable. We can't have both of these happening simultaneously. So the best way to quantify it is this ratio of the number of unemployed workers per job ad that's out there. So think of this as if you're a local hiring manager for a business and you could think of on average, how many unemployed people will apply for the job ad that I have? And you can see before the pandemic, so the far left side here, what was pretty normal for us in Central Oregon was roughly a 2-to-1 ratio. So we'd have roughly 2 unemployed people for every job ad that's out there. Now, I'm not saying that's great choice. If you're a hiring manager, you'd hope you'd have more applicants than 2 on average, but that's where we were, pretty low. Once again, talking about that stagnation in 2019, you can actually see our ratio bumped up a little bit here. That wasn't because of less unemployed or more unemployed people. It was because of the decline in job ads, because the economy was slowing down. Even at record low unemployment, it actually made hiring easier for a bit there for businesses because they were hiring less. We can ignore this crazy trend in the middle here with the pandemic stuff, right? It looks like Idaho. For a while, the trend looked like a wave, and I was putting little like Microsoft, word art or clip art of the surfer guy on there, and it looked great. I'm sure Laird of Superfoods people would have loved it, but now it looks like Idaho, so I don't have any good jokes about that.
Well, that's because they never closed anything down in Idaho during the pandemic, so that's why.
Yeah, that's why it looks like Idaho. Yeah. That's more for you politicians to make those jokes. Yeah. So we depleted that number though. I mean, it looked bonkers for a while there, right? 9-to-1. If you were hiring in the middle of the pandemic, you had some choice, which was good for a half minute, and then it dips really low. So where we're at today is we're at 1-to-1. So we have 1 unemployed person on average for every job ad that's out there. That's slim pickings. This is a 12-month moving average, though. I did smooth this one to take the seasonality out. If you actually looked at the raw number for April, we're sitting at 0.6. So that means you're going to have roughly half of a person apply to your job on average, which is an awkward experience probably, or half of a filled out job application is probably more like it.
Well, if it's a counter job, you want the top half.
Yeah, it just depends, yeah.
Or part-time job.
Yeah.
It's happening.
Yeah, that, remember you're onto something here. You're actually, there's like some real hard questions in my head statistically that I'm like, oh, how does the part-time thing address it? We don't account for part-time versus full-time here, they're just jobs. Job's a job. But that could, as far as labor productivity affect it, is just increasing the hours for the jobs we have. Instead of having 2 part-time jobs, 1 full-time, you address some of your issues. But that's a different conversation. But anyways, it's slim pickings, right? And we know it's slim pickings. We're hearing this over and over again. Businesses are telling us this. The news is telling us this. But it's slim pickings not because workers are sitting on the sidelines. It's because we still see superheated demand, and the workers are back. You know, there's just not a lot of slack in the labor market right now. So I don't have good answers for that, but that's a macro thing of how we're going to do that. The answer, I think, ultimately is going to be that lower demand piece. We got to bring down that hiring demand dramatically, which you don't normally want an economist to be like, yeah, we need to see businesses hiring fewer workers right now. That doesn't normally sound good, but as you can see, it was sort of an unsustainable level that we had never seen before. If we can come down, 20% from where we're at today, I think we get a nice little groove right there. But we'll TBD a little bit. Let's go to the next one. So when you're in a moment where hiring demand is, and be ready to just pull me off the stage if I go over. I don't have any clue where we're at time-wise.
I think we're probably in like a 8-minute countdown.
Okay, that's good to know. Good to know. Do we care about inflation?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll make sure I touch inflation stuff. When we're in a really tight labor market like this, the first response that businesses have is, there's so many dials you can turn to try to hire workers. The first one's always going to be, let's increase the wage a little bit for this job if we're having a hard time filling it. And we saw that. Slide the thingy up a little. There you go. So I excluded wage growth, year-over-year wage, because it's bonkers. So go back again to the right. There you go. Yeah, it's bonkers because we laid off a bunch of low-wage workers, and I'm sure you all know how an average works. But if you scrub a bunch of low-wage workers out of the calculation, you're going to make the average wage jump dramatically, even though nobody's seeing wage gains. It's just that you're cutting the low wage workers out of the equation. So we could not talk about wage changes for like 2 years. And we're just now even now starting to feel comfortable with it again because we don't have these composition issues. That's a fancy word for low wage workers getting laid off and then rehired. And so that's why there's missing data in the middle there. But you can see before the pandemic, we were averaging, anywhere from 4 to 5% year-over-year increase in wages here in Central Oregon. When we adjust for inflation, which was running about 2% before the pandemic, you see that we were seeing anywhere from 2.5% to 4% real wage gains for workers. Pretty good, above the national average. A lot of that's because we were seeing industry diversification, bringing higher wage jobs here. So it wasn't that the average worker was necessarily seeing 3.5%, 4% growth, but the average on a whole was growing because we were bringing in higher paying jobs. You get to the last few quarters where I start to feel okay about it. So it's cut off here, but we're talking about third quarter of 2021 and fourth quarter is the far right of 2021. And third quarter looked amazing. That was that initial response to the tight labor market. Shoot, what do we got to do? 10% growth in wages year over year in that quarter. That was a record. We had never seen that in Central Oregon year over year. Inflation was already starting to run a little bit hot though of this time last summer. So that eroded the purchasing power of that 10% down to only 4%. So we went from a nominal record to pretty consistent wage growth from what we saw before the pandemic. So workers weren't celebrating that 10% because it kind of felt normal for them. And then we get 6% growth year over year for the end of the year of 2021. So through the winter, the beginning winter, I should say. But inflation was running even hotter. So that killed that 6% that workers in Central Oregon saw wage losses at the end of the year, year over year. Even though businesses were paying more, they were giving higher wages. It was just the purchasing power was eroded from inflation. So it is a real problem. And by the time we get the first quarter data, which will come out pretty soon here, inflation ran a little bit hotter through the first quarter even than it was in the fourth. I think it's going to go even more negative. Pretty sure it's going to go actually quite a bit more negative. We might be in like a -2, -3% scenario for workers' wages locally. Next one. So how bad is inflation? It's pretty bad. We haven't seen this for a while, and not in my lifetime or Corey's. Don't worry, we're the millennials in the room. That's right. I always like being in places with Corey. Anyway, so you guys hired well. So we were seeing, like I said, before the pandemic, 2% inflation or so. That's good and healthy. We don't have time to talk about like why some inflation is good, but a small amount is a very good thing for an economy. You don't want to see zero. And deflation is bad as well. You don't want to see negative. Although consumer goods went negative for many years. So where we were through the first quarter, on average, inflation was up about 8%, 8.3% year over year from what it was last year. That's high. It's a big number. The bad news is it's high. The good news is it looks like we've peaked, probably. Knock on wood, all the things, all the big indicators. They're actually releasing tomorrow, the May numbers, I think. And so we'll find out for sure, but we've either peaked or we've flattened out. It's no longer increasing likely. I don't think we'll see another month at 8.3%. Maybe it goes to 8.5, it'll be marginally different. We're gonna start tipping that corner pretty quick here. Most of the things that are feeding the higher inflation that we're talking about are things that are really visible, right? Gas prices, big one, right? Housing, people talk about that one, like huge increases there. By the way, housing is actually one of the least concerns as far as inflation today. It's a big concern if you're someone trying to buy a house in today's market. But for the vast majority of people's housing situation, housing is deflationary today. I have a home that I bought 4 years ago, and I have a 2.7% interest rate. The only increase I see in my housing costs, 3% max that I'm going to see in my taxes every year, right? So inflation is running higher than 3%. So that is actually, I'm seeing a inflation adjusted loss in housing of cost for me every single month. So, and I'm not uncharacteristic. Many people are actually seeing deflation in housing costs. So it's kind of weird to think about how inflation works, but like there are hedges against it, and many people are locked into some of these hedges that have helped them avoid it. There are scenarios where you can talk about it, and it's some of the lower wage workers that are the most susceptible to some of the inflation that they can't hide behind some of these hedges. They have to drive to work. Maybe they have to drive long distances to find affordable housing, so that doubles it up. By the way, they're probably changing their housing situation more frequently. Rent on average isn't growing that quickly. Rent is growing quickly for people who are shifting places of residence. That's where they really hit you on the rent increases. So there are groups of people who are seeing their real inflation looks a lot higher than 8%. And there are many of us who their real inflation they're experiencing is much below 8%. So it really just depends on who you are and what you buy and all those things. Really fascinating. I'm running out of time. Let's go next one. I'm not going to spend any time on this one. One of the reasons why we're seeing inflation, except for just saying that workers saw more dollars in their pockets because of savings during the pandemic. We couldn't spend money. We also were getting some stimulus at the same time. So all of that happened when we were able to start spending that money. People were spending like crazy. That increased demand that we saw, we all were buying things. And by the way, there were supply chain issues. So we couldn't get all the things that we wanted. And so in the situation where demand is high, supply is low, you see huge price increases. That was the inflation. Workers then go back to their employer and say, it costs more for me to the grocery store. I can't pay. I'm seeing real wage losses because of the impact of higher costs of goods. You need to pay me more, or I'm going to leave. And the business says, don't leave, because I won't be able to replace you. There's only 0.6 of a person who might apply for my job opening.
And you get the wrong half.
And you might get the wrong half. Yeah, you're the wrong 0.6 of a person. And so they say, oh, well, I'll give you more wages to stay, which they should because they don't want to lose them. And then the worker is, that's addressing some of it, but the costs to the business, they can eat some of that, but they can't eat all of that. So they pass some of that on to the consumers in the form of higher goods and services again. It's a spiral, right? We're in the middle of the spiral right now. Not even, I mean, so there's no good answers for getting out of it, but it's cool that we're seeing an actual theory before our faces happening. So we know it's not reassuring, but it's happening. Next one, we know about the bottlenecks, the supply constraints that we've been seeing, continued lockdowns in major manufacturing centers and production centers in China still. The pandemic is still affecting our economy today and is still affecting inflation to this moment. Next slide. And at the end of the day, we also are part of the problem a little bit, if we want to say that inflation is a problem, which it is. Interestingly, like our willingness to pay for stuff is a huge factor in inflation. If I expect to see higher prices, then I don't get sticker shocked, right? There's a point where we're all going to go someplace and see something and be like, nah, I'm out. Can't do it, I have a great story. I have got a minute. I'm going to tell the story. So we went to wine tasting, my wife and I. We were so excited to do this, and we went, and I'm not going to say the winery. Might be local, might not. And we got a tasting pour, and 3 tasting pours for their wines. We got 2 of them. She got her own tasting pours. I got mine. So and at the end, they gave us the bill. It was $90, and I thought, wait a sec, something's not right here. I was like, we just ordered 2 tasting pours. And they're like, yeah, it's $45 for the tasting pours. So I was like, you mean it was supposed to be $45 for like pours, not, we all know the difference between a tasting and a pour. Okay, yeah, we all know that. So I would have, if I had known that, I would have walked out. My willingness to pay was not, I like wine, but not $45 for 3 tasting pours. So there's a point where like, we're gonna stop saying yes. And when we do, it will inherently drive inflation down because the demand will tank. And we might just be in that moment right now. Next slide. We're gonna cut all the housing stuff out, sorry, that's for another time. Plus it was mostly Ben-centric anyway, so you guys don't care about that. Let's keep moving on, keep going. Keep going. I have an article I can share if you guys wanna read it. Keep going.
Please do.
Yeah, back one. Maybe forward one. Should be another graph. Next one. Oh, there we go. This one I want to talk. This is what we'll end on. Like I said, before our eyes, we might be seeing that willingness to pay thing happen where demand might be slipping. So this is personal income, real personal income of all of us collectively in the United States. And you can see, going back to, I think, 2013. So you can see we are a pretty constant trajectory of income that we had to spend. This is disposable income that we could spend on things. What's cool about this data is, look at that. You can literally see the stimulus jammed into the economy, which is pretty cool from a data nerd perspective, that it showed up. Like, it gives you confidence that it's real, first and foremost. But you see the stimulus come in, big chunks of money. We spent it. We're spending it aggressively. And you can actually see that real disposable income that Americans have in their pockets today is below trend. Below pre-pandemic trend. In fact, not just below trend, we are now back to exactly what the amount of disposable income was before the pandemic. So that superheated economy thing is addressing itself, because we just don't have, whether that's inflation eroding our purchasing power is a big one, us spending pretty aggressively to the point that we don't have the savings that we had anymore, that's coming down, which is a leading indicator for me that says that that superheated economy is already starting to fade. If that superheated economy fades a little bit, then inflation gets better. That also helps our employers who can't hire because they're not going to be hiring as much. That doesn't sound good, but that is actually kind of good, because that equilibrium is so messed up today. So all that is to say, we're moving in a good direction. And the real question for us, and that's way above my pay grade, is does the demand slow enough that it moves us into a recession or not? I don't have the answer to that. I have no idea. If someone says they have the answer, call them out on that, because no one knows. But it's moving in a direction that feels like a nice little glide path, which is their goal. And so I'm not super pessimistic or too worried about a major recession or anything like that. But it's possible. Anything could happen.
I hate to wrap you up.
Yes,
but
I'm done. I swear. I'm so.
One last question.
Yeah.
You just said their goal. Who's their goal?
The Federal Reserve.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure.
Yeah. The Federal Reserve are the only tool that can control inflation, really. I mean, there's other things you can do, pull, strategic reserves of fuel and dump it into the market. But even then, oil is a global commodity that's priced. Like, we have very little control in the US over the oil prices. So it's, we're all in this together as in all humanity. But yes, thank you for your time. I'm sorry I went probably way over, but it's just so good to see you all in person.
Yeah,
Thanks, Damon.
we appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and hopefully you guys go to the rodeo, because
No, I'd never do that.
don't
Thank you.
get stuck in the traffic like I did.
Uh-huh.
And I'll send you guys a copy of the article on housing so you can get updated on that. It's fascinating, but a little bit different topic.
And your
Perfect.
slides.
And I'll send the slides too. Although you
I
already
have, I have the slides also.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah, it's good to see you guys.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Good luck getting home.
I think the traffic should be okay now.
All right, Jacob. Review right-of-way vegetation maintenance.
Good evening.
Sorry, we squeezed your time a little. We tried.
Yeah, I'm gonna go real quick here.
No, it's good.
I'm here to talk about some proposed code amendments to right-of-way maintenance. Currently, the right-of-way is maintained by the city, or should be maintained by the city. The problem comes with the costs associated with that. It's very difficult to maintain all the right-of-way in the city. So right-of-way, we're talking private property to most of the time to a roadway, that undeveloped area, or there's other little right-of-ways that come up, but the vast majority is that. It's a pretty common code, or pretty common issue for municipalities to have. A way that they deal with it is to make the adjacent property owner responsible for that. The City of Sisters has already utilized this when dealing with sidewalks. Again, super common code to have sidewalks maintained by adjacent property owners. So in Sisters currently, if the sidewalk's busted, snow accumulation, any hazard on the sidewalk, the adjacent property owner is responsible to take care of that. And if they're not doing that, a code enforcement can be started to get that corrected. So what we're looking at is to apply that same ideology to the right-of-way as far as the adjacent property owner maintaining that. And this is to deal with overgrown vegetation, noxious weeds, and accumulation of debris. So that's the 2-minute overview of the code. I can answer any questions since that was pretty quick.
Just one more brief thing. I mean, I think part of looking at this now is that Jacob has been hitting the ground running and working with property owners as it relates to these issues on their private property. And in a lot of instances around town, it's not particularly clear where their property ends and the public right-of-way starts. And so a lot of the same issues that we're seeing on private property, in particular overgrown vegetation and heading into summer and wildfire season, and we're also seeing that in the public right-of-way. And the ordinance later tonight will be talking about some of our ability to move forward with code compliance. But you can only do that on areas of code that you have, the authority over. So that's just a little more context.
Okay. I was just gonna have one question. So I'll do my one question real quick. Is it different for the residential areas from the commercial, downtown commercial? Is it the same? Is it all kind of the same?
So obviously, like downtown commercial, Main, Cascade, Hood, where we have streetscapes, we maintain that area for cohesiveness sake. I mean, if we went to every business owner downtown and said, you're responsible for your landscaping out front, it would look, 1,000th of how good it looks right now.
Sure.
It would be in disarray. And so obviously the city has to make decisions and trade-offs along those lines. But I would say other than that, yes, it applies everywhere in the city as it relates to residential, commercial, industrial.
Okay, thank you.
Quick question. So that homeowner has a fence. On the other side of the fence is the city right of way. So they're not maintaining on the city right of way side of the fence. It's a 6-foot tall fence, let's say. Point out some places, including one where they cut a tree down illegally. They're still going to be responsible for maintaining the other side of the fence.
Correct.
Because that may bring something up. And in those cases where there's property that's on the other side of the fence that's adjacent to a city-owned property, the city will maintain that.
Correct.
Okay, and last but not least, in the reading through the document that you submitted, in there it refers to backyard burning in that document. And my understanding is we do not allow backyard burning in the city of Sisters at any time of the year. Is that correct?
I'm not sure.
Is
I'd have
backyard
to
burning
look
in
at the
this?
code.
Maybe just a portion of the code, but not the portion that
It was in the larger document. that
Oh,
was
okay.
submitted.
Um,
And I'm thinking that we don't allow backyard burning in Sisters, do we? Not for yard debris, but that document that is in there, the long one, refers to it. It makes it look as if it is allowed certain times of the year. So I just think that as we go through that, that needs to be cleaned up. And I can't tell you the page number because I don't have it in front of me, but I did see it when I read it through.
Yeah, I saw it too.
Yep.
no, I want to say that it's actually, it is permitted under the fire regulations come into role. But I'd have to check that. I haven't,
Can we, yeah, let's
haven't
try-
had it all memorized
Let's
yet.
try to
unfortunately.
determine that one because
Sure.
to me, it seems to be inconsistent with what I believe I've been told
Okay.
and understand. That's,
If it's in the same sections that we're already addressing, obviously
Yeah.
we should be looking at the, if we see one thing that's just kind of popping out, is it
Yeah,
okay?
so I think in the next 5 minutes, what would be the most beneficial are things that you all might have questions or comments about, as just was referenced. And we're going through this same process of making sure that, looking at different sections of our code, or even when we talk about the right of way, we're talking about overgrown vegetation, noxious weeds and junk, but clearly we're not talking about trees and wanting the public to, maintain trees in the right of way, right? So we have to make sure that our code is in line with how we want operations and policy to be.
Mhm.
And then ultimately, once all that is codified and approved, we'll need to go out and continue to do education
Yeah.
around, what is allowed, what isn't allowed, what do we want you to do, what do we not want you to do. So if there's questions,
in the
comments.
document, it's right here, it says, number 2, yard cuttings, other than grass clippings may be accumulated to be burned in the first available open burning season. The accumulation is the size, location requirements of the fire code, and dealing with that in there. My understanding is we don't allow it, so if we don't, we shouldn't even imply it.
Do you want to allow it or not?
I would defer to the experts on fire and safety.
Fair
Now,
enough.
I just see it in.
Fair enough.
It's in the
Understood.
document that's submitted that we're looking at.
Understood.
I don't want to do it twice.
Got it. What about right of way and vegetation and putting maintenance on
No, I
private
think
property
that-
owners? Does anyone have any issue with that conceptually?
No, I
Right.
think this is a good start. I mean, if you're looking for head nods, I'm like,
We're just looking for feedback
Yeah.
to move forward or not.
So I see some gray area in the respect of, a lot of this comes from an angle of vegetation management, of what, wildfire prevention, which is
Yep.
obviously a very important thing. So I know, so it's easy to point out places where weeds are overgrown and, kind of a fire hazard in that respect, in the right of way. But I also know of many residential places who have extensively landscaped their right of way, which looks very lovely and it's well manicured, but it's still excessive fuel loading. And if you're going at it from a fire angle, I would say like they need to clean that up because there's too many ladder fuels. And I mean, they have a landscaper come every week and, but it's still a fire threat. So, but it's not, a visual nuisance or anything.
So
So
as
I
it's
just see
written-
this kind of gray area of like, how far are we going to push that?
Right. So as it's written right now, the vegetation is specific to weeds and grass, and there is a option there's discretion in there if I can make a determination that it's not a hazard for fire. So if there was maybe a decorative grass that's being watered and being maybe cut, that could be something that could be ignored. So it's really focused on the weeds and the grasses.
Yeah, and we talked about that this morning and really trying to distinguish and clarify and maybe use some pictures and examples showing just what you described, because you don't have to go far in any direction to see those discrepancies. And one I think we're either fully okay with or at least partially okay with, and one we're not. And we just want to make it really clear. But I mean, if you go around and you look at alleys or certain unimproved right of ways and you see 2-3 feet of cheatgrass or whatever it may be, that's what we're talking about. If you're looking at mossy rocks and things that are decorative with some sage or something, that's not really what we're talking about. But we need to further expand upon that.
Yeah, as this is written, I haven't got a problem with it. That's all we're looking at, but I think that there's more to it, as Jennifer's implying. We both have a neighbor in the similar area that has planted blue spruces, and they have grown into the roadway, and they are 30 feet tall. And they are in the city right away. So
Yeah, so this code doesn't.
Right, I know, and I
address
understand that, but it's something that at some point in time, I think we're gonna have to consider how we're gonna address that sort of encroachment as well.
Lots of layers to the
Yes,
code
sir.
compliance cake.
Yeah. No, I think this is, go ahead.
I have a quick question. Can you explain how and why the city maintains some of the paths that had public funds or grants to help them come to be?
Yeah, and so if there's grants that require the city to maintain vegetation, then the city would continue to do that. And those people, if that vegetation came up, wouldn't be a letter going to those people. I'd be talking with Paul and just saying, hey, Paul, could you get this taken care of? And they would continue to do what they were required to do with those.
And could you give an example of one or two of those projects?
I do not know what those
Yeah.
projects are. No, sorry.
Do we have any?
I believe so. And Paul talked to me that there was some. I think one is on, I'm still learning the streets by the snow cap that runs north and south there along Pine. I believe that is one example of an area where Public Works would have to take care of the vegetation.
Thank you.
All right, anybody else? I think we're ahead and on for moving forward with this, and just maybe we have a couple of points of emphasis that we can discuss one-on-one with you over the next draft period.
Yeah, I think we'll spend some time over the next month. You won't see this necessarily on the June 22nd meeting, but the July 27th meeting, I think we can be prepped for, hopefully moving forward with some language and having some conversations between now and then. Yeah, so we'll keep refining and getting on the same page.
All right,
Sounds good.
Everybody's good with that? All right. I'm going to close. Thank you, Jacob.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Close the workshop. We'll take a 5-minute break. So then take a break. Thank you. All right, I'd like to call to order the Wednesday, June 8th, 2022, 6:30 City Council meeting. Please join me, pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody. That felt very rodeo-like. Roll call, please.
Mayor Breeden,
I am here.
Council President Conley,
Here.
Councilor Blum, Councilor Letts,
Here.
Councilor Ross.
Present?
All right. I need approval of the agenda, please.
I move to approve the agenda.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So moved, so passed. Do we have any visitor communication today?
I do. Kellen, are you available? You're going to go first?
Oh man, I made it by about 30 seconds and
You
I'm out
did
of
a good
breath.
job.
Yes, I'm here.
Kellen,
Hello, welcome.
Hey, thank you so much. My name's Kellen Klein. I'm actually currently living in Portland, Oregon, but going to be moving with my family out to Sisters in September, and very excited to be joining the community and wanted to start my civic engagement early and share a couple of things that I've noticed as I've been traveling and visiting Sisters with my family over the past few years during the pandemic, and that wanted to just make sure that you are aware of, as well as I'm sure you already are. First, as we've been coming to Sisters, or preparing to come to Sisters, it's been a little bit of a surprise to learn that we have absolutely zero childcare options for my son, who's currently 2.5 within the city of Sisters. And so just wanted to emphasize what a challenge that is for growing and building a community when there's no local support for young families. And so we're currently looking at a situation where we're likely going to be traveling up to 2 hours round trip total every day to Bend to take my son to somewhere for childcare, which means we're going to be spending more of our dollars in Bend versus in Sisters, and spending more of our time in Bend versus in Sisters. And so I know that there's a lot of efforts on a county level and also on a city level in the works to try to bring more of that support back into town, but just wanted to emphasize the timeliness and the urgency of it is certainly something that we were surprised to find. So would just encourage you to continue looking into additional resources for that. I've been encouraged that or heard that there might be some stuff coming, but wanted to let you know that at least as of now, none of, or the one childcare Mountainside Montessori that did accept under threes has no space left, and I know that they're closing as well. So that was the main thing I wanted to just sort of emphasize the urgency of. I had one more thing to share, but I was wanted to check with Carrie to make sure I wasn't over time.
I think you're fine.
Okay, cool. Actually, I guess two more things. The second, and this is something I was going to speak to the Parks Commission or Council about, is been very surprised that for such a dog-friendly community that Sisters doesn't have any off-leash dog area in town. I know that the national forests are a great area, and I understand that it's okay to let dogs off leash, at least in some areas there. But one thing that I've noticed now that I'm a dog owner as well here in Portland is that off-leash dog areas are actually an excellent place to build community and also have certain wildlife benefits in terms of like protecting the inevitable off-leash activity that will happen and that I personally have observed happening in Sisters when I've been visiting there. And so I was just going to encourage whether it's you or the Parks Council to think about that in their upcoming parks development plan, because it's a pretty low cost way to provide a recreational space that can have recreational benefits for humans as well, or for people as well, and can be a great sort of gathering place for the community, especially since it seems like Sisters is such a dog friendly area. Last thing I was going to mention is that I actually work for the organization, the Center for Humane Technology. If you've seen the documentary, The Social Dilemma on Netflix, the main character in that documentary, Tristan Harris, is the founder and president of my organization. We focus a lot on raising awareness about the harms of and challenges posed by social media and persuasive technology, and how it can drive a lot of challenges around youth mental health, political polarization, et cetera, and trying to advocate for different ways of doing things. And I'm really excited to begin applying some of the lessons learned from that within my community when I move to Sisters. And if there's any way that I can be of support or a resource once I'm in town, or as prepare to move to town in terms of thinking about resources for civil discourse online or other organizations in this space, I'd be happy to offer any recommendations. It looks like there's not a chat feature to be able to share that, but I can follow with Carrie with my work contact information. So that's all I wanted to share. Thanks so much for having me, and I'm looking forward to meeting some of you when I move to town in a couple of months.
All right. Well, thank you for speaking, and we'll be looking forward to maybe some information to come through Carrie, and look forward to the future discourse.
Great. Thanks so much. Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it. Do we have any other visitors?
Michael, please.
Michael. Good evening.
So I kind of got this wrote, but I'm not going to read it because I'm too boring. And it basically explains why I call myself a whore. I don't use the word whore for ladies. I usually take it. I never do. There's explains why I don't. You shouldn't. And why it doesn't fit the definition in the dictionary. It's just the opposite of what I'm whore. But I'm a whore because that's what people turn me into. And I'm looking at this paper, so I'm just going to mention this. It's okay to read a little out of the paper?
I think that's fine.
No names. Young person on track to graduate from Oregon State University with a chemical engineering degree when he dropped out and began to exhibit signs of serious mental illness. 22 years old. You might have read, probably know what happened. And well, for one, I have nothing like this guy, okay. Well, not right. 22 years old, dropped out of high school, but I have a social science degree, and at some point, right up to the day of my graduation, I really figured out that even though I loved the bloody chemistry class, biology, geology, the whole darn thing, it's all this stuff in my brain, and it was a disconnect from just being. And fortunately, I was living with an elderly couple free for almost 5 years, and they lived right next to the woods, and I could head up to the woods, and that's where I connected with everything. As an example, I've talked to other people that have been young and doing that. There was a lady who was dropped out in her master's time, third year or something like that. I met her at the pumice rocks over by Terrebonne. She was just traveling, and she's going, and she just dropped out because she was in engineering, a form of engineering. She realized at some point, what good is this gonna do the world? And this is just getting into my head. She's nothing like someone who is doing what a lot of people do. Like, well, what do you expect? Look at all the damn violence on television, the movies, the video games, and we got a military complex, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, but I'm the one who talked to her, and I started talking about the geology, the rocks of this and that, and, I actually connected with her for a few hours because it's a serious problem, all that stuff. And it's not just science and engineering. I would recognize that person as a potentially good value that you could maybe use even, through your schools, because we want this social dilemma, because yes, I'm very aware of it. I was aware of it when we got started. There is a statement. City fees to the editor. I'm probably talking about, used to be on your council. As a city councilor for 4 years, I listened, assessed, and learned. When a citizen's issue came before council, I attempted to wear their shoes and imagine myself in their situation. Of course, that's what I've been meaning to do, but then you act. Otherwise, it's more food. That's the whole problem, as I've been explaining with my condition, but society is large. Back to the other article. There was a man in Redmond that played a stepfather role for this young person, who, by the way, I can't even believe incarceration. He's obviously just, lost. But then of course you send him to an institution, a mental institution, like, oh my God, that's just as bad. And yes, I even previously, before, they just keep screwing me over and over and over and over, down even Deschutes County, even a person sitting right next to one of your Deschutes County commissioners, you just got, because he was like out of his head when I talked to him, or, how he's supposed to be, but there's no one there. You gotta just be real with these people. You just gotta be freaking real, engage with, get all the damn stuff you learned about and all that stuff. But I don't know if I'm getting through to anyone, because that now commissioner ended up, oh boy. I'm not gonna get into that story. Okay, let me finish. KTVZ reported that Mormon told them, that is the person that was stepson, when you are telling law enforcement that somebody is escalating mentally and they're not doing anything about it, or they can't do anything about it, then there's a major flaw in the system. Well, then of course they'll say it is not their issue. Well, I've got an issue. I've been around this Deschutes County system. I want to see one of the top people. He's a doctor, and I'm not going to go through the system again, because as someone sitting here, I think it's kind of a point, they're into controlling, usurping, narcissistic, and trumping me, and they're not there. And so there is a deputy that works in town. Can I say his name? Hudson. And then I left messages twice, yesterday and today, to him to just, because in the same county, set up the damn appointment with this person. It's someone that you would all want me to talk to, plus he would learn something, and he's also a doctor. So because they canceled my disability, because my neck is shot, and I can explain to him how bad my neck is, including what a psychiatrist long ago, the psychiatrist out of the book, said about if he didn't get his neck fixed, he would have went insane. All this, it's all real. He has to do write a thing, send it to him. There's no one out there, so it's right there. And I'm not going to go kill anyone. But by the way, the killing is just absurd. But it's basically how I saw it many years ago. You're on your knees begging to be killed. It's a murder-suicide what you're doing through the entire thing. I hate to say it. I don't want to be the one standing here telling you at all. No way. Are you kidding? But it's a murder-suicide thing, man. It's bloody nuts. It's just like they don't grow up in your culture, and then people that are real in this culture, look where they end up.
Thank you for your comments. All right, next up on the agenda is the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Consent agenda is passed. Okay. I think the building's clear. On to council business. Item A, public hearing and consideration of ordinance 524. Lost my script, sorry.
You need more paper.
I did.
You don't have enough of.
Okay. I have to open a public hearing. I move to open the public hearing. Next up is the staff report. Jacob? Hello?
What was that?
Hello.
Hello again.
All right.
All right, here to discuss ordinance 524. It's a general code enforcement procedure with a civil penalty component. I want to start with what we have currently because this code ended up being a lot bigger than I expected. And what's really going on is just building on current codes that we have or current processes that we have. So currently in our code, we have the ability to apply for warrants. It's a very small portion of code that basically just states that you can go to a judge and get a warrant. We currently have fines as an option for an enforcement mechanism in the code, almost all sections in the code, and with some sort of penalty for breaking that code. And we also have an enforcement procedure for code enforcement in place, and that's what's kind of been utilized for my short time here. So what the ordinance does is it adds an additional procedure. So we still have both in place and we still have both options, and we'll have both multiple options for what's in here and what's currently in the code. So the ordinance, I'm going to go through the ordinance really quickly in different sections and just address what's in there. Please feel free to stop me if you have any questions. But ordinance 524 starts with just basic code enforcement definitions and authority, pretty standard entry or intro to the code. And next it goes into the enforcement procedure options. Now these mirror the ones that we already have. It starts with voluntary searching for voluntary compliance. This is what I call the courtesy letter that we send out. The next option is an enforcement order, and that is another way to say an abatement notice, which is what is commonly used in code enforcement, and again is in current code. A portion of this enforcement order is a civil penalty, and that is really what's being added here. And that's just another way to issue fines, and I'm going to get into that here shortly. Back to the other options that this code opens up. It allows for citations to be issued through the police department or Deschutes County Sheriff's Department. And it allows for our attorney to take action for code enforcements in any way or ability that they have. Again, this is all redundancies in the code. The next portion of the ordinance deals with warrants. Now, as I spoke to earlier, we had a very small portion of code regarding warrants. This warrant section really details how we would go about getting the warrant, the grounds, what happens if they refuse, and the cost. This portion of the code has been necessary in the past. I've worked with judges that wanted more information on how to get a warrant. Some of them, not all of them, aren't comfortable with short paragraphs giving that option. And lastly, it gets into the enforcement orders. As I said before, a portion of an enforcement order is going to be in a civil penalty. A civil penalty is a citation process, but it's going to be done in-house. It's going to be administered by the City of Sisters. And what this does is it allows us to have more control over that system, those citations, and we can hopefully utilize them to get people to correct their violations. So current code, we can get DCSO, find a person, ID them, cite them into justice court or circuit court, depending on the violation, where the judge would adjudicate that issue. We're pretty much removed from that process, and the judge takes over and the county takes over. Now, the civil penalties portion of code takes the judge out of there, and we put in a hearings officer. So we're not expanding our powers. We're having a dual lane for citations. So again, one being the court system, and the other would be the civil penalties with the hearings officer. So the bulk of this 18 pages really is outlining that procedure that the hearings officer is going to have to do to make sure that a person that receives a civil penalty is getting all the due process that they need. So it outlines, let me take a step back, for the enforcement procedures, there's all the information that needs to be in there. So I would send a notice to someone with a violation, and this code outlines what information would need to be in there. The property that's in question, the violation, what to do to fix the violation, how much time they have. In addition to that, there's an appeal. So we're opening up the civil process for citations and appealing, and we're also opening up a process for a person to appeal the nuisance itself. So if, for example, a person gets a letter, hey, you're in violation of our vegetation code, and they think that their decorative plant isn't in violation of the code, they can appeal this to the hearings officer. An addition and a redundancy would be if there was a violation, a fee associated with that, they could also appeal that. So again, the vast majority is the hearing rules, the settings, the notices, how a hearing is recorded, how people are noticed for the hearings, and the remedies. Now, the benefit again to this is, if we have to use DCSO, they have to track the person down. So we're taking resources away from the county. Sometimes people are out of town. We have a lot of out-of-town property owners. Those people would have to be dealt with and ID'd wherever they're at. And so we have to get other agencies to work with us on that, and that can be difficult. But lastly, the most benefit that we get out of it is the ability to issue it and then work with the people, and then I can work with the hearings officer if that violation gets changed. So the point would be to issue the violation, get that property owner's attention, have them correct the issue, and then we can start working on the citation or the fee, lowering it, get rid of it, modifying it in any way. So we have a lot more freedom to utilize the citations in that way. I've operated or I've utilized a civil penalty system for years. It's very effective at getting people to correct their violations. And there's not a lot of, it's way easier to do than an abatement. When abatements we don't want to do, it's the last thing we absolutely want to do is go in and take people's property or cut their weeds for them or things like that. So again, the keys to remember is this is in addition to what we have, and it's building on the foundation that is already found in our current code.
Okay. Carrie, is this time for questions, or do we wait until the deliberation portion?
So it is time for the public comments. And
Right.
then
I just wanted to make sure
yeah.
that now is not the time for questions. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I'll now ask if there's any public comments.
There are none.
Okay. That makes it easy. There's no revisions to the postman ordinance, is there? Okay, just to make sure. All right. I'm going to close the public portion of this hearing. Thank you very much. Now we can deliberate and ask questions. Does anybody want to start with anything?
I've been down at this end, sure. The first question is, has this been run through legal?
This was
I assumed it had, but I have to ask the question.
Yeah, I know.
Just one page.
You knew the inside joke. That was the inside joke
Yeah.
that Jacob made earlier.
And,
When I submitted 6 pages and I got back 18.
yeah, exactly. That's what I figured when I read it, but I needed to ask to be sure.
Sure.
And I expected that answer, but It was even better when you told me how much larger it was when it came back. Yeah, that tells me. So as I understand this, then the concept of the civil penalties and why we want to go in this route is it gives us the opportunity to use the velvet hammer, the ball peen hammer, or the sledgehammer, depending on what it is we need to do, and hopefully we gain compliance, and perhaps without even any collection of fees or because of the threat, therefore, of. And some people, when they realize, hey, there's going to be a cost to me to do this, okay, I'll take care of it. I'll write a letter to the editor and I'll call you names, but I'll take care of it. And so I think that's a good idea. I think that's where I'm going with this, as opposed to having to go the traditional route of taking it into the circuit court system and let's save that for things that are serious and dangerous to the community, or where we're concerned about the safety of our employees. And good work. And good job keeping it to 37 and a half pages.
Jennifer?
In your experience, your years of experience, what percentage of the time do you find yourself utilizing, the civil option?
It's hard to put a number. I'd say that 90% of people will take, in a program that's established and people know that if the city says they're going to do something, they're going to do it. So if you have that established, I'd say 90% of the people will do, 85 to 90% of the people will get it done without utilizing this stuff. This is the next step, and that usually takes the other, 85 to 95% of the people. It makes up that about 10% would be my estimation with past municipalities.
Okay, and I'm feeling, and tell me if I'm wrong, I'm feeling that this is I'm hoping this is a win-win. Obviously, we're, I think, a little biased in that we want you to have the right tools to do your job effectively. I just want to make sure that this is also, as a citizen, property owner, what have you, that this is also a better system. And it seems like that. It seems like there's lots of opportunities for correction and working together. So I just want to make sure that we don't get a little distracted that this might be a better process for you in the city. I just want to make sure it's also just good for the citizens too.
Right. If we're talking this process versus the going to a court,
Yeah.
It's probably about the same as far as impact to a citizen. The only way that I think it is better is once that's been issued on the civil side, I can have more contact with the hearings officer and work with the hearings officer to, if say they got the issue taken care of or there's some other problem, it's easier to work with a hearings officer than it is to get in with a judge and try to work with them. So
Okay.
I think overall it's slightly beneficial for the citizens.
Okay, that's what I was picking up. It seemed like there was a few more benefits for the citizen that, if they did eventually come to compliance, that it wouldn't just be this bad mark on their record or something.
I try not to use citations punitively.
Yeah.
I want them to be used to encourage the people to fix it, and then, there's no point in really punishing people at that point. Now, it could happen if you have a repeat offender, someone's just not going to do it. But again, the point isn't punitive.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
I agree with you. I think the hearings officer is a kinder, gentler sister's way to go, and I appreciate it. And as being a property owner who 8 years ago was flagged, it was a very confusing process. It didn't feel like anyone at City Hall knew what the rules were. And I had a nice letter and I had an intern, and then we had a phone call, and then they're going to come to the property, and it was not a good process. So thank you for coming in and cleaning it up. And I agree. I think the educational approach with the understanding that there could be more deterrence if the work is not taken care of locally is a better option than everybody having to go through the municipal route. I'm good with it. Thank you.
I had one more question. Who ends up being a hearings officer?
The hearings officer, the council will get the final say. I can't remember the specific wording, but it'll go through you guys.
Oh, well, hold on one second. No, I'm just, you're giving us more to do? No, I'm just kidding. My only comment is, I think this is pretty well written. I think we all understand there is a little bit of weight to it, but it's not, again, to be wielded for no reason. It's obviously there for last resorts and things like that. So I think they're good tools for you. But I'll just say the obvious. The most important thing is still going to be you, right? The Sisters Way is going to be the person that's in your position, whether it's you or somebody else. And we have full confidence that you're going to be able to handle that, and we're appreciative of that. But these are just tools for you. They're really not for anything else other than for you to be able to do your job effectively. And we appreciate that and acknowledge that as we're passing these. Again, for property owners that down the road, they're going to get a conversation with you, and I hope that they see the value in that conversation instead of being an authoritative thing. It's more of, hey, we're all in this together, and noxious weeds are noxious weeds, you know. But I appreciate your hard work on this, and I don't have any further questions. Does anybody else? Okay. Looks like we can get a motion to read.
Mr. Mayor, I move to have the city manager read ordinance number 524 by title only.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded. Let's vote to read by title only. Is this roll call or no? Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The motion carries.
Ordinance number 524, an ordinance amending the Sisters Municipal Code to adopt general enforcement procedures and authorize administrative hearings for violations.
All right. Thank you. We need a motion to approve and adopt the ordinance.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve and adopt ordinance number 524.
Second.
We have a motion made and a second, and we need a roll call vote. Carrie?
Mayor Breeden?
Aye.
Council President Condon?
Aye.
Councilor Letts?
Aye.
Councilor Ross?
Aye.
The motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jacob. Good job. All right, next up. Resolution 2022-12. Another public hearing. So I will open the public hearing and have a staff report. There you are.
Yes, here I am. Thank you.
Sneaking up on you.
So this is the first of two ordinances for the budget adoption. You approved the other three with the consent agenda. And so this particular resolution approves all of the appropriations for next year's fiscal year budget. And the way it works is you have the general fund at the top, and it goes by department for each item in the general fund. And then the following funds are broken down more specifically personal services, materials, and services. So that is the approval for the fiscal year. Any adjustments or overages to that will be approached with the supplemental budget process. But that is all of our work for next year.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask if there's any public comment.
You're done.
All right, I'll close the public hearing. Time for council discussion. Does anybody have any questions of Joe, or what's the final number, Joe?
It's 24,975, 959.
Okay, I trust you on that. It's written down, so
It is written down.
I'm
Yeah,
not worried.
and it all foots.
I'm not too worried. So thank you.
Thank you.
Looks like we need a motion.
I move to approve and adopt resolution 2022-12.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
No nays.
I said aye about it.
Okay, it's really quiet. Thank you,
I
Joe.
was in the middle of a cough, so it kind of.
All right, next up is a public hearing and consideration of resolution number 2022-13. I open the public hearing for this one. Joe.
Yes, thank you again. So this is the opportunity for anybody of the public to discuss or comment on the use of state shared revenue funds. So if you'll remember in the budget meetings, we had that occur one time, and then we have it occur again in this budget adoption meeting. So.
Okay. Thank you very much. Is there any public comment?
There are none.
Okay, I'll close the hearing and we will discuss. Anybody have any questions about this portion of it?
We're just flying through the budget.
That's great. Well, we had a lot of talk about it, so
Yes, we did.
thank you for all your hard work, and we might as well just, right now, just thank the budget committee again for their work, since this is all part of it. All right. Could probably use a motion at this point.
I move to approve and adopt Resolution 2022-13.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
You,
So it passes. All right.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, Joe. Spend it wisely. You got the plan.
spend it all in one place.
Don't spend it at my house. It's illegal. All right, next up is discussion and consideration to approve a professional services contract with Kittleson and Associates. And we have Troy. Hello, Troy.
Hello, everyone. Good evening.
How's everybody doing? Good? Okay, good.
I'm just going to read into the record so that there's clarity. A discussion and consideration of a motion to approve a professional services agreement with Kittleson Associates for the East Portal Master Plan in an amount not to exceed $99,977 and authorize the city manager to execute the agreement. I know you folks are very good at reading your agenda item summaries and your staff reports. I've outlined for you the process to date, which has been relatively extensive. With that said, I think we're ready for the next steps.
Okay, does anybody have any questions for Troy on this?
Excited.
Me too.
Okay, so he's excited. That's good. We're all excited about that. Do anybody have any questions?
I just had one question, clarification, because there's something in there about, there's some sort of deliverable very quickly, like within September or something. What was that? I mean, I know this is kind of a time limited process, so.
We're working with Kittleson and Associates so they'll have a comprehensive preliminary design, so to speak, so we can apply for a construction grant through ODOT.
Okay.
So we've discussed with Kittleson and Associates to do their level best, direct them to have a preliminary design sooner rather than later so we can apply for that grant.
And if I'm not mistaken, they were very helpful in keeping us confident that they can make that grant window. Is that correct?
Yeah. In all of my discussions with Kittleson and Associates, they've been very cooperative and
It's not like we haven't worked with them before, right? I mean, we've worked with them before on things.
And a
few
comment,
times.
I think I picked up either in the parks discussion or somewhere along the lines, they've worked very closely with our parks planning consultants as well on different projects. So as this plan moves forward, and with the spaces, might be open space or beyond the hub, we expect to be able to have some discussion back and forth between the two entities to be sure that both plans reflect where we want to go. Is that correct?
Correct, Counselor. They have a very strong working relationship.
Okay. Looks like we can entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve a professional services agreement with Kittleson and Associates Incorporated for the East Portal Master Plan in an amount not to exceed $99,997 and authorize the city manager to execute the agreement.
Very emphatic motion. We have a second?
A second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
No nays, so passed. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Good
folks.
job.
Have a good
Exciting.
job.
Now it's really exciting.
Yeah,
Yes, it is.
The work
get
begins.
moving.
Are you working late tonight to get that started?
Paul and I are always working.
Yeah.
That's
That's Troy, that's Troy's late night workout outfit right there. Dresses up for the evening.
Nice color shirt. I like the color of that shirt, by the way. We're on to other business staff comments. Paul, you want to start us off? Sure. We lost Joe. Is he coming back?
Nope.
Are you doing?
He's
Are you?
not.
He's not.
No, I mean, after the budget, he just, it was a mic drop. He's like, I'm out. I'll see you in 9 months.
Yeah.
Just
Audit.
He's got his 25.
yeah,
going.
I guess
Yeah.
audit. No.
Yeah.
He's good.
I'll give him a B++ for that.
If you have any finance questions, you can quiz me and see how well I do.
He's just making the meeting shorter. I appreciate it. There you go. Anyway, go ahead, Paul. I'm sorry.
So I think just the theme of the night that Troy just kicks us off on is, grants, infrastructure planning grants. We got some opportunities ahead of us that we'd like to take advantage of. Some have really quick timelines, some we're more comfortable with the timelines. The first is a small city allotment grant. That's an ODOT grant for up to $100,000 for a street improvement or maintenance project. So a project that's pretty high on our priority list is Brooks Camp multi-use path and intersection improvements out there associated with safety with the McKinney Butte and Brooks Camp intersection. So we're taking a good look at that. Corey can fill you in on the details, what we're coming around with that. We have an Oregon Department of Energy grant opportunity coming up. And that we've talked about would be for a battery backup system for the wastewater treatment plant and HQ for our new solar array. And we feel, yeah, we've been getting good information, not only from Oregon Department of Energy, but also our consultant that's doing the work, or our contractor that's doing the work for the wastewater treatment plant solar project. We just found out there's been a release of some grant dollars from the state fire marshal, not specifically for us. We're going to target the local government defensible space dollars, and those dollars are going to come, or that grant opportunity is going to come. They tell us winter 22-23. So we're going to be looking to that for this fall, winter. And then our Oregon Park and Recreation Department grant, just to update on that. Troy will be giving a presentation to the Oregon Park and Recreation Department for our Elm Street path. This is kind of the final step before they make their decision process. So he's been working with their engineer on getting a presentation together for them. And then last and not least is the STIF grant that Troy mentioned for the construction of East Portal Mobility Hub. So we're going to be anxiously awaiting Kittleson's work to go after those dollars. That's really, it's kind of grant 101 for us right now. So
what are you doing on Wednesday? Like, you got nothing else to do for the rest of the year. I mean, it sounds like it's all done.
There'll be more after this. Just a little update. You guys probably saw it. Little press release came out.
Yeah.
So good news on that.
You don't want to say it out loud? Come on, put it in the minutes.
Not going to jinx anything, but yeah.
Let's just say we're kind of going around the issue.
Mhm.
There's still a process that has to happen at the state level. So
But we have every reason to be somewhat excited.
very excited.
Yeah, okay.
What year did that thought come into be for a roundabout at that location, ballpark?
I started working on it in 2011. Yeah. And then
At Barkley.
well, both.
I
We were
mean,
looking at
the
both.
alternate route.
Yeah. And then we focused put all of our eggs in one basket to get Barkley, and then
A lot better than 2030.
You know, we're gonna be 2028's but too.
absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the mark that I think we can really be proud of all across the board.
Well, I just asked because it's 11 years of faithful stewardship and progress, not just at staff level, but as councils have rotated through. And it's dismaying at times to think, oh, I didn't accomplish anything on council, but you're just continuing the work that was laid out before you and possibly starting something new and fabulous for 5 or 6 or 11 years down the line to pick it up. So thank you, staff, for keeping that momentum going as council changes.
We appreciate your momentum as well. Yeah, we couldn't have done it without you. Yeah, it's very key, especially with a big safety project like that. You know, all of us are, stressing about accidents and those type of things, and that's why we want to get the project built.
I was on an unrelated meeting with the BAT team, our broadband action team, and they had 2 minutes at the end to say, anybody got any good news or anything like that? And I beat that drum again.
All right.
So
good.
Are you keeping up with the weeds?
They are now about waist height, so no, we're not. Are we trying? Absolutely. So you can, almost all over town, you can see fresh weed eating that's happened or happening.
Crazy.
We need to invest in some goats.
And it's one of the toolboxes that, one of the things that we use in our toolbox of weed eating. Obviously, we do a lot of hand picking. Robin's been on that for the last month since she started. We do some herbicide work. We have to. So we've done that several times, and it's unfortunate that with this much rain, how thankful we are for the rain, but
Yeah.
the other stuff comes with it.
Like I said, I hope it stays wet all summer so that stuff doesn't get real big and then go.
Yep.
That's my worry.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay.
Good job, as always.
As always.
Carrie?
Couple meeting reminders, as always. We've got the community event on the 21st on Tuesday, which we'll have quite a number of tables, actually. Upper Deschutes Watershed will be there. We'll have a Parks Master Plan table there. Community Development will have a table. We'll have a water conservation table, as well as the C4C will have a vision table and a community calendar group there. So advertisement I didn't look at the paper today for it, but it should have been in the paper today. I need to check. It was great. We'll start releasing city announcements and Facebook posts, and I just sent a release to all of our boards and commissions yesterday about the event, so they've all been invited, and feel free to invite as many people as you'd like. And I'm working on a number of other things, but my brain is full.
It's been a day.
It's been.
Scott?
Good evening.
Hello?
Hello.
So we got a submittal on the Patterson property recently. You guys should maybe keep your distance from it in case it does come in front of you someday.
Which,
Just clarify.
Oh.
which
Yeah,
piece?
sorry.
Boy, you're
When you say that,
reading my mind.
makes
So we refer to it as the Patterson parcel. It's the one off of 242 and Hood, kind of that intersection. It's about 9 acres.
Off the north side, like that?
Yes.
42.
Yeah,
Okay.
north side. So that will have to.
That's a little less scary than the other.
That'll have to go to planning commission because it's a master plan project. So the joint meeting with planning commission is coming up next week, and we'll have a packet to you guys Thursday afternoon with information, 2 reports, one a housing plan kind of report, and then an efficiency measures report as well. So give you some read material to read over the weekend, and we'll make a presentation on it next week, and try to have a really good meeting with the planning commission so we can kind of see where the areas of convergence are with the 2 bodies and which areas we might be diverging, or hopefully there's more converging than diverging, but it's a good opportunity since both bodies are going to have to review and approve it. We want to make sure that hopefully there's in general alignment. So I think it'll be a great discussion. And we'll do our best to kind of help steer that conversation to some staff recommendations that we have for which efficiency measures or strategies we think hold the most merit, and kind of see what you guys think as well. I think I told you last time that the outdoor lighting went to planning commission, but it's kind of been kicked back to a work session. We'll do that July 7th. So we'll dig deep into that and make sure that it's well vetted before it gets to you guys. Corey, I don't think we've mentioned this one in the past, but we're planning to do some cleanup on some zoning here in the near future. The Heavenly Acres subdivision is some UAR zone land that we're going to start to engage the property owners with to see if we can get that cleaned up. UAR is Urban Area Reserve, and it's something that's really not appropriate for inside the city. And it's been 22 years, I think, since it got annexed, and it's time to clean it up. So we're going to look into cleaning that up for those folks out there.
I'm sorry, can you tell me where that is?
Churches.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Should have known Heavenly.
It's known as the Heavenly Acres subdivision. That's the plat name.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. We at the Parks meeting last week, we got a presentation by the engineer that's been retained by the Upper Deschutes Watershed Council for all the improvements that they're going to be doing in the stream. They're going to start, I think, August 1st, and it's going to take 2 or 3 weeks. That was, even though it's kind of the height of the tourist season, it's the best time to be in the stream because the water is the lowest, and some really interesting stuff that they've got planned there. So just wanted to give you guys a heads up. And then just, you heard from Jacob that we're really working on the weeds, and I think we're getting some pretty good response from folks to keep their weeds cut as we get into the drier season. So I think we haven't had to cite anybody yet. We don't have the ability to. We will soon. But we're getting pretty good response, I think, from people when we get a letter or a call. There's a lot of other things going on, but that's kind of just a nutshell.
Can I ask a question about the lighting and how that's going? I know we've had discussions up here about dark skies, and some of it is dark skies friendly, and some of it was, hey, maybe we could do something more, and there was a level of dark skies that would make us a dark sky city. Is that part of I just kind of wondered what the temperature level is down in the planning commission about that particular part of it. It's something I was interested in. I don't think the council was as a whole, but
I think we were.
were we?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
About being a dark skies.
Setting the stage.
Okay.
Oh, no, we wanted to have it done by October.
You wanted it retroactive?
October 31st this
Oh,
year. dark skies.
2016, we can do that.
No,
We've got magic
I'm just
wands.
asking the question because I just kind of want to, I'm not trying to mess up the process.
No, you're fine.
Yeah.
But I mean, the short answer is we don't know yet. We didn't really even get into that necessarily at the planning commission meeting. But
Yeah, just, we haven't made a decision as a city yet to pursue certification, but once that came up, I looked into what that would take to occur, to see what we'd be signing on to as a city and what we would, what the implications of that would be. So I did a lot of education myself in terms of what the requirements would be to attain that status. And there's some guidelines that they put out that tell you what you need to have in your ordinance, tell you kind of what education component you have to have in your community, which a lot of the stuff that the Astronomy Club is already doing kind of fits that bill. But it's a question of what's the appetite for some of these requirements that, that the ordinance requires. And we won't know until we go through this process what the appetite of it is. And once we get to the end of it, I think that's what Corey's point was, that, we can see where we are at that point and see what the appetite is based on.
yeah, I agree with all that. There were a handful of comments from the school club as well as other advocates at the planning commission meeting wanting some revisions to some of the proposed language that Scott had done research and put together on. There were also some comments from planning commission, saying, hey, we better talk to some businesses about some of these ramifications as it relates to, mood lighting, outdoor lighting, string lighting, things like that. And not to try to influence necessarily where we end up, but to just remember that the largest component of diving into this issue is that our code is to some extent not being applied, enforced, and it has dates and trigger points in the past that weren't hit that are now outdated. So we're here, ADA, or not ADA, sorry, Dark Sky Association compliance is over here. We need to get to here first. And then, we may move down the road, but I think trying to go from here to here, our goal is not necessarily to spend the next 9 months talking about this topic. We've got a lot of other big stuff going on. This was supposed to be a little more of a surgical project. Go in, clean some code up, move the needle, and then we can revisit it in a year. It's not unlike code changes that we made in the past where it's say, hey, let's revisit it in a year, let's revisit it in 2 years. Was that enough? Do we need to go further? Should we do more? Do we have capacity? Are we investing funds? So on and so forth. So I'm concerned that we're going to get our foot stuck in this issue for the next 9 months, and we can't do that. So sorry for saying I didn't want to kind of show how I feel about it, but I did. I just laid it all out there for you. So we're having those conversations. taking it back to the planning commission end of July, I think it is, and start of July. And, I think we all need to be careful that we need to make some improvements. There's some obvious improvements to be made. And then where we go from there, I don't know if we should try to tackle the whole thing right now.
Well, if there are red flag conditions in the information I saw that went to the planning commission, things that to me would be a non-starter, would you like to know about those separately in an email so that you can see if that's something that can be worked in rather than trying to do it here? In other words, there are some things, there were a couple of dates in there in terms of duration of compliance that I thought were excessive, and I would have a great degree of trouble with.
I think the short answer is yes, but I would say
that way you could
wait until you see the next version, because it might go to planning commission 2 or 3 times. So I would wait.
But my main reason in bringing it up is that if it's a duration issue, and there's an opportunity to consider as you're working through this whether or not that issue can change, it might make it something that I could vote yes on. What I saw right now, I understand, I hear what you're saying about let it go through the other steps. I'm fine with that. But I also don't want to send it to the planning commission 3 or 4 times to have them think they've really worked it all the way down and have it come up here and have me go, I ain't voting for that.
Well, what'll happen?
I'm trying to avoid.
Yeah, what'll happen is the planning commission will approve something, and you all will either approve 100% of it, 99% of it, 98% of it, 97% of it. So tweaking a date, by a couple years or a few years or something like that, at the council level is totally appropriate for you all to say, well, they felt that way, but
if anything,
you're the ones that make that decision.
If anything, I just caution us all to not get too involved early because that could unduly influence stuff before.
Yeah,
that's why I asked the question is offline.
No, I get it. I totally get it. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, I think my sense of the issue is that a lot of people talk about it and a lot of people don't really know necessarily what they're talking about. The advocates do, but no one else really does. Warm light, cool light, kelvins, lumens, this, that, the other, what does it mean? What does it look like? What does it not? Who does it impact? We're all just speculating at this point. So we need to dig into that code a little bit. We need to really understand what it means. We need to correct some deficiencies in the code, and then whether we shoot for the moon down the road, great. But we're not going to make that decision in the next 6 to 9 months.
No, probably not.
So I'm just, you all could, but I wouldn't recommend
one thing I will emphasize though is I think we were on agreement to have that be the price, whether it's 6 or 9 months, or maybe we do it in 2 steps. I think that most people could probably agree on that because we only have a certain amount of workload, and we understand that you have to manage all this. We get that part. What I would say is, again, I'm just going to emphasize this. We kind of like that idea of taking the bigger step, even if we're not taking it now. So the eyes on the prize always have to be on that as we're going through this first half.
Sure.
That's all I'm saying.
It just agreed. And it just means, what does it actually mean to take that step?
Yeah.
That's the part that we don't know.
And that's why, and I'll encourage all of us again, is to kind of let the planning commission do its work and let you guys do your work. And but I just wanted to ask the question.
I will say that the ordinance was written with the certification in mind.
I'm glad to hear that.
The question is whether the community and the planning commission and the council, want to go there.
Yeah. Well,
so that's
we'll eventually get something, and then we'll make
anything will be an improvement, but
Gotcha. Thank you. That's pretty much what I wanted to hear.
Took care of my question too.
Okay, good.
Cool. And I'm with you, Corey. And what the mayor said, we need to build the foundation. I'm not saying we have to have it all done, but part of building the foundation is to make sure that everything that's in the foundation is where we want it to be, so we're not going back in and punching a hole in the wall to fix something that we missed or we didn't bring up.
Okay, cool. Any other questions for Scott? Thank you. That got a little long, but I think it was good. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Joe? Okay, he's not Joe.
Joe's not here. Scott mentioned housing plan and efficiency measures. I just want to emphasize that those are working drafts. Scott and I talked about those for an hour and a half this morning. I think that there's some work that needs to be done there so that they're not just documents that kind of rehashes a lot of the same ideas, that we could do, and let's talk about it and think about it, and then put it on the shelf. So, and Scott and I are in agreement on that. How can we really look out to 2025? And for all intents and purposes, we're already multiple years into the process of delivering a new multi-family affordable housing project. And I've already supported, single family ownership through Habitat and other things to get, more units online by 2025. But then in some of these documents, housing plan in particular, how are we looking out to 2030 and where are we really trying to be and how are we actually getting there? Again, not what could we do or, so on and so forth. So look at those with a critical lens and good questions. A consultant will be here. And then, just keep in mind that they're working documents and we'll be working on those all the way into fall and early winter. I was at the Houseless Networking meeting last evening. It was just really, again, nice to see, Lieutenant Davis there, obviously Ian Reed there, Commissioner Adair was on as well. And then really Mandy's comments about kind of the great impact and reach and touch that David Fox, the case manager through the county, has been able to have. She read kind of a letter that he wasn't able to be there because he's actually delivering meals that, those evenings that conflicts with the meetings. But I forgot the statistics, but it was just incredible the number of people he's been able to connect with, the number of people that have, been, almost everyone's been receptive to kind of welcome him into their camp. One, not so much, but, to be able to just offer resources, try to build a relationship, build a rapport, so on and so forth. So it was just to hear that. I'd heard that from David. I'd heard that from Colleen Thomas, who's back on maternity leave as of 4 or 5 weeks ago. But to hear that from Mandy and from that networking group was encouraging. So on that topic as well, the first board meeting for the joint office is next Friday, the 17th. And so Councilor Blum and I will be participating in that, and we're planning on providing kind of an update to council on the 22nd, as well as having the IGA for you all to consider. It should be pretty straightforward, really just mirroring the stipulations in House Bill 4123 that actually created the pilot projects. So we'll probably bring it to you and maybe entertain some discussion, but also maybe ask for approval that same night. But TBD, we're working on it in real time. We're also working on, we've got a draft for an affordable housing RFP. We need to work with the title a little bit. This is different than our affordable housing grant program. This is sort of a one-time thing, or every few years, however it ends up being moving forward type of thing. So that may or may not be on the June 22nd agenda. I think we're hoping that it will be, at least at a high level, maybe for 15-20 minutes to just get, again, some initial input, potentially comments, questions, and direction to continue moving forward. But that's in the works. Got the draft earlier this week, I think, maybe end of last week. And then, so this wildfire preparedness open house, our consultant Craig Letts will be there speaking a little bit on behalf of some of the efforts he's helped us with. And then I'm planning to be there as well, just to answer some high level questions. So what other topics?
Where are we on the DMO work to create the nonprofit?
Yeah, you're getting the appetizer, entree, and dessert June 22nd. You're getting all of it.
I'm happy to hear that, because I knew we were getting close to that July 1.
I guess you've gotten the appetizer. You're getting the entree and dessert at the 22nd.
Well, I'll just have the entree because I can't have dessert.
Okay,
right now,
yeah,
so.
fair. They get to do the dessert, actually, honestly. Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
I'm
Yeah, you can have my dessert.
destroying
I have
the
a cookie
analogy.
over there that I didn't eat that somebody's welcome to. That includes Scott.
So yeah, that'll be the 22nd is going to be
The 22nd is loaded.
immediate.
Okay, that was gonna be my question, because I've heard that a lot, and I torpedoed the 13th meeting in July, so.
Just as a heads up, that June 22nd will, I think without a doubt, be a 5 o'clock workshop start time.
But I was gonna say,
If
we're gonna
not
start a little earlier to
earlier.
kind of get that process
So we'll
along.
get that. I won't put that out officially until we get a little closer, just for making sure we've got the right things, but.
Next time we'll have to give Damon an hour or two, so live and learn. No, he was great, but.
I did forget to mention too, and I apologize for bumping in, the EDCO lunch is next Monday, I believe, from 11 to 1:30, and I've got tickets for Jennifer, Michael, Nancy, and Corey. So if anybody else would like to go, I think there's still some available. Let me know.
Did that answer enough of your questions about the DMO?
Yes.
Want to know what you're going to get on the 27th? Or is it a happy surprise?
I'm okay with the happy surprise. I was more concerned about time. I just wanted
We're
to
right
tell
on
you
track.
We're right on track. It wasn't in your report. I just thought I better ask.
Yep, right on track.
I expected nothing less, but I did want to ask.
No, great question.
That's an exciting topic, by the way.
Yeah.
I've been getting snippets of it for so long, I just can't wait. Like, so
We aim to please.
Nancy can't stop smiling about it. That's cool.
Any other questions? Topics?
No. When are you going on vacation again? You need a vacation.
No, I'm good.
You good?
Fall.
Okay. All right. I think it's up to us now.
October, is it?
Yeah, October.
Is that when we were chatting about?
I started that, didn't I?
We're all taking October off.
Oh.
We're all talking to each other, so.
I am definitely out of here for 3 weeks, but I'm only missing one meeting, so.
I'm sorry,
We're counselor business, it's us now. That's all we got.
I coughed in the middle of your words, so I couldn't hear.
That's okay.
I have a couple things, questions and also some thoughts. I was unable to attend most of the Parks meeting as I had a medical procedure at that time. Jennifer sat in for me on that. I think
Well, I stood the whole time.
I think the thing that I saw in looking, not having heard the presentation, but in looking at the technical drawings that were presented, is aside from some bankside work and stuff like that that was originally in the proposal, I still think everything we wanted to see in the stream is pretty much still there. At least it looked to me that it was. Now, I haven't compared them sheet for sheet, and I do have the old ones, but it was encouraging, let me put it that way, even though we may have had a couple of members of the Parks Board who thought otherwise. And so I had one question related to, are they going to be staging, because that's in August, are they going to stage down at the far end, down by the sewer overflow where the concrete is that where they'll stage?
They're staging multiple areas.
Okay, so
Yeah, one relatively close to the,
that's the part I missed. So
yeah, the intersection with 20.
yeah,
Because there's that gate there.
right.
So you
That's what
want
I
to
was
take
thinking.
advantage of that. I think maybe staging a little bit on the other side of the park too.
So will the park itself still be somewhat available for use, or will it basically be considered a construction zone and closed? Do you know? Just as a curiosity, I'll probably get asked at some point. So
There's gonna be times where it's gonna have to be closed.
that's what I would think. I mean, that's not unexpected, especially since we'll have people in the campground and trying to keep the activity on the other side.
To the extent of that, I mean, we're gonna try to minimize it as much as possible.
Yeah, okay.
We're gonna kind of turn it over to them and say, you know, what space do you need to safely do, you need to do? Because I mean, I can't remember how many loads of rock and how many plantings and, you know, they got equipment. I mean, it's gonna be a operation.
So a cost to us when this is done, a cost to you and your division when this is done, will be restoring the turf and the park aspects of the park.
There'll be some of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're also looking at an opportunity to reduce turf.
Good idea.
So that construction traffic will tell us what turf needs to go.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you. And another thing is had some contact both personally and from some citizens related to the closure of the blood work lab at St. Charles here in town. It's more of an inconvenience than it might appear to be. I happen to have a blood draw the morning that it closed, so I had to go to bed. And because they closed 4 other clinics, the wait time was almost 2 hours to get a blood draw. And I was told that it was 4 to 5 hours the day before. So when you think about some of our, especially our seniors, who oftentimes have multiple opportunities to have blood work in a month or 2 months because of the medications they take, it's going to be a true hardship, I think, for some of them to make it into St. Charles, even for one of the assisted living vans to drive them in and be tied up there all day because they don't do appointments. It's all walk-in. They have one computer to sign in on. So if you get somebody who's not computer literate, that can back you up for 20, 30 minutes. So I think that we should really consider as a community whether we can afford as a city to look at funding a phlebotomist to be here and have that lab open 1 or 2 days a week for our citizens. We can say what it's going to be and what the time's going to be, and even for maybe some of our more less mobile patrons, we could even have some appointments available that they could be assured they could get in and have something done. So I've asked Corey to look into that, and I just want you to know that's where I am on it. I don't have numbers or anything like that. I have no idea, but I think that when we start to look at the loss of essential services, that's one of them. And I do think that sending people to St. Charles or to this clinic on the south side of Bend, that's the only other place they're doing it there. Maybe there's one in Redmond, I'm not sure. It is not convenient, and especially when we get to the wintertime. We have some citizens in this town that I don't really want driving Highway 20 in the wintertime. They're like my mother, and you don't want her driving Highway 20 in the wintertime. So that was that. And then last but not least, I have some guests from out of town. And I was kind of talking about what's going on in the meeting night because they kind of tried to convince me to skip and go to the Bulls. And I was talking about what we were doing, going over the agenda, and he looked at me, he's from St. Louis, and he said, how many people are on your staff? And I told him, he said, there's no way you can be doing all the things that you say you're doing, you're considering with the staff that you have. And he kind of knows what he's talking about. He's been around the block a few times, and so what we do. And so I want to give, again, my thanks to all of you, especially all the staff here, that the work that gets done that nobody sees, whether it's pulling a weed or unclogging a drain line or working with the planning commission or making Gary Ross happy. I mean, those are, or putting together a salary schedule. I mean, all these things that get done that make the city work, and it's done so seamlessly that nobody sees it. That's not common. So thank you very much. I'm done.
Really, the only meeting I had was COIC's board meeting, but I had a conflict that night, so Andrea participated, but she's not here, so we may never know it. Or I could read the minutes and tell you, but I hadn't done that yet.
I think it's okay if we once in a while miss one of the meetings,
Well,
at least getting all the news.
It was the first full school event in 3 years, basically. So I was not going to miss that.
That's good. I think we need.
It was very well attended. I think a lot of people were really excited to get together again and be involved with the school.
Did you have fun?
Yeah.
How was it overall? Nice.
Yeah. Well, thankfully the rainstorm occurred, the torrential downpour occurred right before the outdoor event, so didn't really have to. Yeah. It was soggy, but it didn't rain, so that was nice.
Okay.
My turn.
17 things.
No, really short. I went to the quilt show kickoff party.
I was there.
Yeah, I know.
Surprise, I didn't see you. And I just wanted to pass on the words of praise and thanks from not only the quilt show executive director, but a very long-term board member who at random times came up to me and said what a joy and what an ease it was to work with the city and organizing all their events. So please pass that on to the appropriate people. Park master plan update. I went to farmers markets Sunday at 10 to 11, not realizing it didn't open until 11, and saw the consultants there with the dots. A lot of people stopped and looked. It'll be interesting to see what the results were.
Pickleball.
Did they have a lot of dots? It didn't have any when I was there.
Judy, I sent Judy because I wasn't feeling well.
Yeah, I was afraid
They were
of
in
that.
mass.
Yep. And I would ask Corey, before you spend a lot of time looking into getting a phlebotomist into town, if you would touch base with all the counselors to see if it's worthwhile pursuing it. Does that make sense? If it's only Gary that's interested in it, should you waste your time?
We're talking with St. Charles, and we'll know more from them in the coming weeks. And then, that'll be something we'll need to talk to. We'll just talk to them in general, gather information in general, and then we'll assess and discuss and go from there.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Because there are other medical providers in and sisters that could pick up that ball and run with it, maybe.
I don't think there is anybody in Sisters that can do a blood draw.
Well, and
Well,
I did
they
it
could.
before St. Charles, so it's, might not be as hard as a hardship as some people might believe. Sorry, that's it for tonight.
I'm a non-St. Charles person. I'm with the other big place, and they do blood draws here in town. So,
Oh, that's good to know.
but it's not a lab either. So,
Well, it doesn't have to be
You
a
know what I
lab. You
mean?
have to have some place to do your analysis.
but
If you're on medications that.
they only do it one day a week, and you got to hit them at the right time. Like there's a 2 or 3 hour window. So, but anyway,
No.
the fact is, and now it's my turn. I'll agree with you, and we need to do something, and we're looking into it. That's kind of how I know Corey's working on it, and we've had discussions. There was somebody from St. Charles at the firehouse when we had the Keep Sisters meeting, and they were very informative, and
Unfortunately, they're not with St. Charles anymore.
Yeah.
So there's a little irony there.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I don't know if how that was preordained or not, but yeah, we were planning to have St. Charles at the June 22nd council meeting to provide an update.
Okay.
But they actually requested to come on July 27th, citing, which I think is legitimate, that they'll have more information and know more at that point. So heads up, you know, between now and then, there will be some offline conversations, and there will be some online conversations at the 27th.
yeah. And I knew that was happening, so just wanted to back you up on that. I sent an email to Carrie about my thing went away. Faster Internet Oregon outreach that the Deschutes County BAT's doing. I don't know if there's a way we can help. I'll talk with Corey and Carrie about if we want to try and get some messaging out. There's different ways we can do that, by pamphlets or sending information through utility bills or working with other partners just to create equity in the internet connections around town. I think it's an important thing, and the hardest part about it is the people that don't have internet, you can't get a hold of because they don't have internet. I mean, it's like a compounding issue.
Yep.
And so I don't know if that was sent out this afternoon, but I did send something to Carrie. And it's basically a big outreach program, and it sends people to a website so they can do an internet test, and if they're below 25.3, then they get put on everything gets put on a map, and it's statewide, and then hopefully this fall we'll know where the good parts are and where the bad parts are, and
We should
where
assume the spots with no dots have no internet.
well, that's the thing, you know, it's not I don't think it's an easy thing at all. I think
no.
it's kind of like beating your head against the wall a little bit.
Well, I worked on
But
this a lot when I was in the valley and doing technology work, and it's not easy.
I might want to talk to you offline, I want to make sure that me as the person on the bat is doing the right thing and using all the tools, not only up here, but with the staff. Because I know that other people are looking at the issue too, and I want to make sure that we're all kind of looking at it the same way.
Is the school district a partner in that?
I just-
Because they,
I just wrote a note.
I have.
because of all of the, internet.
I have a roster of about 25 people that are on the bat, and the unfortunate part is because of the scheduling of the bat, it's about once a month. You only get about 10 or 15, and good thing Commissioner DeBone was there at this time. That was his first time on it. I've made every meeting, which is 3 now, and we're only doing about 1 a month, so we're not meeting a whole lot. And
Well, if you're looking for an entity to spread the word, I think the school district might be good.
fan
because-
maybe.
Right, exactly, because,
Yeah.
they already had to go through this, year and a half of trying to do remote learning.
This is exactly why I'm saying it out loud, though.
And Don Cooper from FAN could tell you how many hotspots they gave out during the last 2 years of the pandemic, which would be very telling.
Yeah, she might be someone that's so important that we might want to encourage her to be on the Deschutes County BAT, because she knows way more than I do.
Well,
I mean,
and certainly we know that the issues in Sisters, for instance, in Sisters Country, are very different than the issues in Bend proper. Yeah. And even Madras, which has its own ISP.
Yeah.
And I see weekly and oftentimes daily complaints about the internet service that we currently have, even in the town, and the unreliability of it and those things. So I realize we're looking at connectivity for people that don't have it, don't get me wrong. But I think there's a lot that can be done to improve the existing infrastructure as a part of that, bringing it to the other people.
Well, one of the reasons that it's important is because there's hundreds of millions of dollars out there that are getting put into this issue federally and state. And again, I'm not out there just grabbing money just to grab money, but I think that we have this issue. Let's put the two together and do it in the best way possible. I never thought when I joined the Deschutes County BAT that I would have to take so much action, but it's absolutely necessary, to be honest with you. It's not something that I was really plugged into, so to speak. So, but I'm on it now.
Good
And
network analogy, plugged in.
Yeah.
Okay, you get
So,
there.
and that's all I have. So unless anybody has any questions for me. I did Memorial Day and it was fantastic, by the way. I did, in the past when Chuck was mayor, the former mayor, he kind of asked people if they wanted to do the Memorial Day, greeting all the veterans. Well, I'm a veteran and I like doing it. So I kind of just didn't ask anybody and I did it. Obviously, there's been some talk about town, about event fees and all of that. I think that will come out in the wash over the next year or two. I think that most people are fairly happy with what we're doing in that regard, but there are some loud members on Facebook and other places that are just
Social media.
Yeah. So, but anyway, we can always revisit the event stuff if we have.
Maybe that new guy can help him
There
out.
you
That'd be
go.
great. That's a good note to end on.
Yep.
Yeah, but I don't think that we're doing anything intentionally wrong. I think that what we did was essentially good, and
Very purposeful.
yeah, we did it for a reason. So,
And I thought that your response that I saw Corey in somewhere was very appropriate about this was an action that was taken before the pandemic, and that there were representatives of the VFW and other organizations involved in the discussions, and everybody kind of forgot about it because we weren't doing anything. And I think that was a fair statement, much more so than what you're picking on us by making us do this. I mean, I'm with you, Mike. I think there's opportunity to look at this, and as we kind of smooth this out. But I believe that most citizens are going to look at the fact that we're trying to recoup some of the costs of what we have to do when we have an event in a park. And so they're not paying for it. It's going to go over pretty well with a lot of people.
well, and I think the other thing is the pre-COVID world and post-COVID world are completely different. And again, we just always have to reassess. And if we have to reassess, we'll reassess, right? Okay. I don't have anything more. Anybody got anything? Done.
Checks.